Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much. And before we get started, don't forget to get that quintessential glass of drink, whatever it is that you enjoy, or wherever you are, if you're just gardening or whatever it is you're doing. I really enjoy being with you right now. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, it was in the early spring of 2014 that I had a huge wake-up call that shook me so hard with such a profound jolt that quite literally enabled me to transform my life from the inside out in an instant. I was a young man at the time, in my early 30s, and not too bad looking, and in reasonable good shape. Well, so I thought, but I guess I was very good at deceiving myself. I was renting an illustrious, very elegantly fully furnished apartment in New York City, in Washington Heights, that is in close proximity to trendy bars, high-quality restaurants, whimsical coffee shops, and exquisitely beautiful parks with ubiquitous trees and verdant green grass, where the locals love to flock on warm sunny days and enjoy eating their sandwiches on park benches. It's an area where lots of professional people live and rent out apartments from local residents. I had been in a short marriage that had lasted only 2 years. I had returned home to my apartment one day to discover a note from my wife, saying she wanted out of the marriage, and I never ever saw her again, although we legally got divorced through the postal system. I mean, how remote is that? What had gone wrong in our marriage, I wondered. I didn't know. I had truly thought we were happy, but I was clearly wrong. I felt like a complete loser and an absolute failure, and I wanted to run away from myself, but that is rather difficult when I'm stuck with myself all day. During the day I had a rather run-of-the-mill, humdrum job, working for a very mundane, prosaic company, doing a laborious, repetitive and tiresome job that I simply hated and despised. It was so dull and tedious that I literally wanted to tear my hair out. I was that frustrated by my life, as I literally lived for the weekends and after work hours. I would long for that clock to move its hands towards 5 o'clock. I was always the first to grab my briefcase and jacket and leave the office in an enthusiastic haste, which was a stunt that had not gone unnoticed by my superiors. My boss, Mr. Leverman, had piped, "Steve, you are very keen to leave the office on the dot. You must have a very beautiful wife waiting for you at home," he teased. "You got that right, Mr. Lieberman," I would say, and I'd fly out the door like a witch on a broomstick. In the last few months, I'd returned home, put down my briefcase, removed the restrictive work clothing that I always wore to replace it with a casual cotton top and a comfortable pair of pants, and I would hastily make my way out of the apartment and walk across the road to the bar that I would regularly frequent, and then I would start drinking, as it helped me release all my inhibitions, as by nature I was rather inclined to be reserved and reticent. I think I was not consciously aware that I wanted to get drunk, but invariably I always did. Indeed, there were times that I was so intoxicated that I slept through the following day, only to wake up a day later, appalled to discover that I'd lost a whole day of my life. I mean, how does that happen? I had to phone up work and make up some dramatic excuse that I'd been unable to phone in sick, as my mother had just had a heart attack. Little did I realise my company had my mother's home address, and they sent her a bouquet of flowers, wishing her a very swift, fast recovery. "Why has your company sent me flowers, sweetheart?" my mother had said to me. "I'm not even sick." "Enjoy the flowers, mother," I said. "They were sent to you by mistake." Looking back, I think I truly found solace, consolation and comfort in drink. And they were always the same old people drinking with me late into the night, long after everybody else had long since left, and we had one thing in common: we all wanted to forget. There was Rudolph, who looked like a drunk, as his face was so red and puffed up, and his eyes as glazed as a dead fish, and he had about as much physical energy as a sloth. He stayed at the bar to avoid any contact with his belligerent nagging wife, who henpecked him from within an inch of his life whenever he returned home. Then there was Morris, who simply hated his job and became very aggrieved and upset when the junior assistant had received the promotion he believed he deserved. And finally there was Nicholas, who had been laid off from his job and had been hit by a tsunami of depression. One night, as we were sitting at the chairs around the bar, where there was a mirror at the back counter, while the bar manager kept refilling our glasses the moment they became empty, I remember looking at the mirror and thinking to myself, who is that big, pixated, ugly deadbeat sitting opposite me? I felt very sorry for the poor man, for he looked like a complete and total shipwreck. I'm glad I don't look like that, I thought smugly to myself. I watched the cockeyed, inebriated man, with his red, bloated face, downing his beer greedily. I nodded at him politely as I realised he was staring directly at me, and I lifted up my beer in a gesture of friendliness, as if to say cheers, as it occurred to me that I had stared at him rather rudely. Then I had a blinding revelation that nearly threw me off the chair with a flying start. Oh my God! The man that looked like a large red bullfrog, with a red face and gouging eyes, was my own reflection staring back at me in the mirror. It was me. I was mortified and felt as if someone had poured a bucket of ice-cold water over my face. When I glanced at my sloshed friends, I realised that they were as pathetic as I was. To an outsider or a casual observer, we would have looked like a club of bladdered jellyfish, as we sat there like great big blobs of translucent jelly, drinking ourselves to death. I promptly picked up my jacket and returned home swiftly, and decided from then forth that I was never ever going to drink again. I knew that one beer led to another and another. I simply had no willpower to stop, so I had to never drink again. It was the same with a bag of chips, as I was never happy until the last potato chip had finally been devoured. I remember walking to the mirror at home and staring aghast at my appalling reflection, as if seeing myself for the very first time. My God, you're ugly, I thought to myself, staring at myself through critical eyes. What the heck have you done to yourself? I was young, but the excess drink had taken a heavy toll on my physical appearance. My eyes were round and puffy and almost bursting out of their sockets, and my face had gained some blobby cheek implants that had not been there before, and my Roman nose looked like a New York road map, as it was covered in red spider's veins, and as for my skin tone, it was drained and dull. I had noticed my waistline had been growing considerably larger of late, possibly from the estrogen in all the beer I was drinking. I had been in complete denial. I considered myself fit, but looking at myself, warts and all, I was not a pretty sight. One of the secretaries at work had teased me and said, "You look like you're 3 months pregnant," and she'd pinched some of the fatty tissue around my waist, making me feel very self-conscious. I was thinner than you in my first trimester, she boasted, and I secretly wanted to throttle her. The following morning, as I was shaving in the mirror, I remember realising I needed to do something to distract myself from drinking, so I offered to take the neighbour's dog, a little Scotty mix, Trixie, for walks around the park after work. My neighbour was an elderly lady in her 80s, and so my generous offer came as somewhat of a surprise to her. "How much are you charging?" she asked, looking at me suspiciously. "Nothing," I said. "You'll be doing me a great big favour. I need something to do to distract me from my alcohol addiction, and I don't want to walk around the park like a lemon without a dog." "Good for you," said the old lady. "You should be proud of yourself. Alcohol never did cure any problems. It only makes them worse, and Trixie would appreciate some exercise." I think Trixie thought her Christmases had all come at once, as every single day I walked her around the park, and her little tail never stopped wagging, and she lifted her leg up everywhere to announce to the doggy world that she was still very much around. Soon many of the locals interacted with me because of Trixie, and I was finding that the more I abstained from alcohol, the less I wanted it, and I could see with little effort my waist was beginning to shrink and my face beginning to look more normal and less like Mr. Blobby. One day as I was crossing the road with Trixie walking back to the apartment block, I noticed a familiar face sitting in a jeep parked at the edge of the park. It was Rudolph, my old drinking partner. What was he doing sitting in his jeep, I wondered. I trotted over the road towards his car, and he unwound the window very reluctantly, and I was overwhelmed by the sour stench of sweaty, cheesy trainers and very, very bad body odour. I'd never seen Rudolph look so out of sorts before, as he rather reminded me of a vagrant with his dishevelled, bedraggled and scruffy appearance, and as I glanced towards the back of his car, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out he was living in his car, for everything from gas cookers to golfing equipment was lying precariously all over the place, resembling a very disorganised and disordered jumble sale. "What's going on, bro?" I asked. "The wife has finally seen sense and kicked me out, and I'm living out of my car. I got laid off my job because I looked so unkempt and unpresentable, and I'm an embarrassment to the company. Look at me. I'm a complete mess, bro." "Are you still drinking?" I asked. "No, I can't hang around a bar looking like this, but I am going to give the stuff up. It's completely ruined my life. Look at what I'm reduced to." "If you really mean that, you can come home with me," I said, "and sort yourself out." "But are you sure, bro?" said Rudolph, his face suddenly lighting up. "You sure I won't be a burden to you?" "Well, you will be if you start drinking again," I said. "If you do, I'll throw you out. Is that a deal?" "Deal," he said. After Rudolph moved in with me, things became more positive and life lifted, because it was rarely good to have company, and someone who seemed as determined as I was to quit drink, and was facing the same tumultuous, challenging journey to sobriety. At the time, Rudolph was heartily relieved to have a roof over his head, and while I was at work, he cooked delicious homemade meals, shopped and cleaned the apartment, as well as made appointments for job interviews, so the routine worked well for the both of us. One day, Rudolph and I decided to visit a therapist together, someone who had a great deal of experience in helping people to get off the wagon permanently, as we both lived with a paralysing fear that in a moment of weakness we could succumb to the drink. We were led by the receptionist into a very distinguished-looking smart office with an elegant oak wooden desk, with only a glass of mixed red roses gracing its surface. The turquoise walls of the office were covered in pictures of whales and dolphins, which suggested our therapist was rather passionate about the ocean. We noticed a couple of very comfortable white leather recliners, where she asked us to take our seats and wait. "Hello," said an attractive woman entering the room finally. She had shoulder-length bobbed hair, fair skin and blue eyes, and was very pretty. "I'm Dr. Limerick," she said, shaking our hands. "I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance." "Sorry, I thought you were going to be a man," I stammered awkwardly. "Is it a problem for you that I'm not?" she asked kindly. No, of course not," I said, flushing bright red with embarrassment. "I have your reports here," she said, looking at them closely. "I see both of you have issues with drink. What I'd like to establish today is the root cause of your drinking. The question is, what are you running away from?" She said that looking directly at me, and then at Rudolph, through her blue eyes very intently. "Is it not possible to just drink because you enjoy it so much that you just can't stop?" I challenged her. "Put it this way," said the therapist. "If you go to an Italian restaurant, when do you stop eating?" "When I'm full," I said, "but I do tend to overstuff myself. I fill up as much as I can." "Exactly," she said. "But when you drink, you can't stop. The question is, why? In my experience, excessive drinking is like a band-aid that is covering a deep hurt. We need to establish what that is so we can rip off the band-aid and allow the underlying wound to heal. Well, if you really want to know my problems, I said, feeling myself growing angry and the blood rising to my face. My bloody wife divorced me for no reason at all. Just left me a note and bogged off into the sunset just like that. Now that's one hell of a mean thing for her to do. And if you think that's not enough, I simply hate my job. I have to work with numbers day in and day out. Do you have any idea how boring that is? I'd sooner watch paint dry. Well done, said the therapist. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm glad to see your passion, for it reveals your anger, and that exposes your deep underlying hurt. As far as your wife leaving for no reason is concerned, said the therapist, now you and I know that that is not altogether true. You need to question yourself about your relationship with your wife and establish why you think she may have left you. No one ever leaves a relationship for no reason at all. That's nonsensical. You leave when things aren't working out. Well, I guess I didn't talk to her much, but I was tired when I got back from work. Maybe I did kind of ignore her, watching all my sports games and drinking a little bit of beer. I suppose I took her for granted. There you are, she said. You see, you already knew what your problem was with your marriage, and also about your job. If it really makes you so miserable, why don't you look for another job that will make you happy? I looked at the therapist with a bemused expression on my face. It's not that easy to get another job, you know. Do you realise how tough it is out there? It's all right for you to go casting judgments on me, sitting back here in your swanky office. Defeatist talk, said the therapist. You'll never find a job if you believe you won't. Word of advice, be very careful what you order from the universe. It's just like ordering from a restaurant menu. Choose your thoughts carefully. As for you, she said, turning to Rudolph, what's been hurting you in your life? My wife, said Rudolph. She's such a bully, and continuously henpecks me. I can't stand the sight of her. She reminds me of a squawking chicken. She races after me with a wooden spoon and speaks to me in broken English with her strong Portuguese accent. She whacks me with the spoon and screams blue murder at me. Half the time I don't even know what the heck she's going on about. So you allow yourself to be bullied and patronised, said the therapist. Do you have so little respect for yourself, and such a poor opinion? No wonder the woman doesn't respect you. Well, you can't beat a woman up, stammered Rudolph, trying to defend himself. Who said anything about beating up a woman, said the therapist. How can your wife look up to you when you're failing to stand up for yourself and be a man? If your marriage can't be fixed, move on, get a divorce. As simple as that, said Rudolph. Is that not rather extreme? I'll tell you what's extreme, said the therapist. Drinking all hours of the night to avoid going home. Now that is extreme. The therapist took out a piece of paper and began scribbling out something. This is your script, she said, for next week. I want the two of you to go camping for a few days. Get some fresh air and plenty of exercise, and I'll see you again when you get back next week. Why? I asked, looking perturbed. In my experience, nature is an excellent healer and rejuvenator, and if you've been far removed from the natural world, you need to get reacquainted with her. And believe me, she'll help you get your life in perspective, and she's a good healer too. So there I was with Rudolph at a camping shop, purchasing a 2-man tent and everything else we would invariably need for camping. And then there we were, out on the road, taking the 362-mile road trip from New York to West Virginia, which was about 7 hours in the car. So we left early, so that we would arrive there by lunchtime. A work colleague of mine knew of a private camping ground where we could go camping, and according to her, The area was really exquisite. I must be honest, I was actually secretly rather excited about going camping, as I hadn't been camping before. And by the sounds of things, Rudolph was also a complete novice, so it was going to be one hell of an experience for the both of us, whatever way you looked at it. Before long, we found ourselves driving down all these bumpy, rocky roads that seemed to go on forever. We would pass high embankments with trees, farmers' fields, grazing cows and horses, pretty barns, flowering meadows and undulating countryside. "It's exquisite," gasped Rudolph, who was completely mesmerised by the scenery. "It's so good to get out of New York." Before long we reached a sign that read Singing Prairie Campground, and we drove through the open cattle gate until we came to a really beautiful silvery lake that was surrounded on the rear side by ubiquitous wood green, consisting of hickories, oaks, beeches, maples and yellow polars, and in the distance was the smouldering hazy silhouettes of the mountains that rose up in the sky like undulating pyramids. We parked our car under a large oak tree in the open gravel clearing that overlooked the lake, and to its rear was a large area of sagebrush that branched out into even more woods. The immediate clearing around the exquisitely beautiful lake, with its pretty scattering of sizable trees, was, we realised, the campground where we were expected to set up our camp for the night. For two city boys, we just stood and stared at the scenery in reverence and veneration, and we could see the white head of a bald eagle hovering above the lake, and we both took turns to study it through the binoculars. I was wonderstruck by how majestic and magnificent this noble bird of prey actually was. In a trice we set up camp, and everything seemed to flow seamlessly. And for two fledglings with very little experience, we weren't doing half badly at getting our act together. We decided to cook a very late lunch and early dinner over the fire pit, so we barbecued some juicy steaks and spicy burgers, which we ate with salad, bread rolls and macaroni cheese. Finally, with full, satisfied stomachs, we retired to our sleeping bags for an afternoon siesta, as we were both feeling the exhausting effects of being exposed to the fresh, heady oxygen of the beautiful mountain air. We must have awoken at 8 o'clock, and we sat on our camping chairs around the fire pit, staring up at the huge night sky, with its scattering of sparkling silvery stars and an almost full luminescent moon that basked the evening in an ethereal, soft light. We drank back cups of cocoa and talked for a long while. It was an exquisitely tranquil and magical night, and we could see the subtle reflections of the silvery stars and the vase-shaped trees displayed on the surface of the lake like a mirror. And to add to the magnificence and magical mystique of this amazing evening, we were serenaded by the cheerful chorus of crickets and frogs. Finally, we decided to turn in for the night, but I quickly set up some battery-operated fairy lights into a couple of mason jars to light up our campsite, so that we could wake up in the night if nature called and not be exposed to the darkness. I awoke later during the night and glanced at my cell phone. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had a desperate need to relieve myself, so I climbed out of my sleeping bag cautiously and ambled through the sagebrush towards a maple tree. Once I'd finished my mission, I was just about to return to camp when I saw what I thought was a bear wandering around our campsite, possibly having been alerted to the smell of food that we'd recently grilled earlier on in the afternoon. I could not remember what the protocol was concerning bears, so I sneaked up behind a few trees to get a closer look at the creature, as I was rather concerned about Rudolph's safety in the tent. It hadn't even crossed my mind to bring a rifle or bear spray with us on this trip. I could see the bear walking around the tent, and he appeared to be inspecting it closely. But when I saw a hand touching the canvas, I thought, "Wait a minute, that's not a bear. A bear has paws. It doesn't have hands. But then what is this thing?" I wondered. I could see the critter pulling out the Christmas lights from one of the mason jars, and I got the distinct impression he was very impressed by them, for he examined the string of light bulbs in his huge hands with an expression of wondrous awe on his face. And then I watched him glide away with the mason jar and the lights, and that was when I got a closer view of him, as the lights from the jar lit up his whole body so that I could see him clearly. On seeing the critter at close range, My heart began to thunder through my chest like a powerful drum, and I could feel every vibration. I could see that this was an apex predator, something that demanded respect. I mean, he was seriously colossal, both in size and girth, with an incredibly powerful torso that was quite literally ripped with muscle. He had very strong, stocky short legs, and exceedingly long arms that hung well beyond his knees, and a low-slung cone-shaped head that simply folded into his Herculean-sized shoulders very seamlessly. I did not see the facial features, as they seemed too vague and obscure because they were dark, but I do believe his face had very evident human-like influences. I would describe him as half man and half beast, for his whole body was covered in long flowing hair. I did not discern a repugnant odour from the creature at all. In fact, I didn't smell anything, for indeed Rudolph had smelt far worse sleeping in his car like a dosser for days at a time, so the very fact that this wild creature didn't appear to stink was nothing short of astonishing. The critter was standing only yards away from me when he began to hoot exactly like an owl 3 times, and his hoots were brilliant. I was terrified. Had he sensed my presence, I wondered, and was he calling his friends to tell them that there was an easy meal close by that they could quickly ambush? I was so frightened by this horrifying thought that my mind became clouded by a fog, and I couldn't think straight, and so I remained very still, hoping that my assumptions were very wrong. All of a sudden, darting through the sagebrush was a female creature and her youngling, who was only about 2 feet tall and looked very mischievous and rather like a great big teddy bear. I could hear the excited chatter as they began to gather around each other and examine the string of Christmas lights excitedly. I'm almost certain they were speaking in a language, but it was so fast and animated, and it sounded almost like gibberish. I remember once seeing a documentary of Bushmen being shown water coming out of a tap for the very first time, and their expressions were so astonished and amazed. Well, I assure you, the expression on these creatures' face was very much the same, for it seemed the magic of those Christmas fairy lights had bedazzled and beguiled them, and they were awestruck. I could see the parents talking away happily as they discussed the lights in great detail. It seemed as if they had a whole lot to say about them, for their discussion went on and on and on, and they spoke together backwards and forwards, for ages and ages. Where had the little one got to, I wondered suddenly, for he seemed to have vanished into thin air. Suddenly I felt a presence behind me and looked around to see the 2-foot impish youngling staring at me with deep-set dark eyes that twinkled with a roguish playfulness. My heart sank, for if his parents were to discover me, I would indeed be in serious trouble, so I thought. I put my finger onto my lips and went, "Shh, shh," and the little critter copied me and did exactly the same. Shh, shh. I could see the youngling's eyes were completely fixated by my dog tag that I wear around my neck, because it gleamed brightly, as it was made out of mother of pearl, which he seemed to find very eye-catching. It had been brought for me by my ex-wife as a fashion statement for our wedding, and on the back of the tag was the date that we got married. I only wore it because I loved the piece. I pulled it off and put it on the critter's neck, and the little youngling was completely absorbed by the necklace and looked at me with an animated, joyous expression on his face, almost as if he'd won the lottery. With relief, I watched him join his parents without alerting them to my presence. To my amazement, the big creature actually returned our Christmas lights to the tent and then promptly glided away. When I ambled back to the tent, I began to shake Rudolph wide awake. "Wake up, bro! Wake up! Wake up!" He groaned. "What's wrong?" I proceeded to tell him exactly what I'd seen, and he looked at me with astonishment on his face, his jaw dropping to the ground, and his eyes growing as wide as saucers. "You do know what you saw," he said. "No, of course I don't," I said. "You saw Bigfoot. Do you realise how lucky you are? You know how many people would do their nut to see what you've just seen. It's not fair," he said. "Why didn't you wake me up?" You have no idea how big and scary he was, I said. For a moment, I did think I might end up being dinner. If they meant to harm us, said Rudolph, they would never have returned the Christmas lights or left us alone. I did realise that Rudolph was right, and it would seem the creatures did not intend to harm us at all, which was a monumental relief. We spent the rest of the weekend at the camping site, hiking, bird-watching and talking, and Rudolph sat up all night, hoping for a sighting of the Bigfoot, but they never returned to our campsite, which caused Rudolph a great deal of disappointment. To cut a long story short, it's been over 5 years, and I haven't touched a single drop of alcohol, and neither has Rudolph. But in such a short space of time, so much has changed, as it invariably always does. For a start, Rudolph and I run an online business together, and things are looking promising for our futures, and we both love our work. Rudolph divorced his nagging wife, and we currently are both remarried to the most wonderful woman. I have decided to never touch drink again. I cannot trust myself to stop at just one beer. There are times when I think one would go down rather nicely with some barbecue spare ribs, but I'm not prepared to take that risk, as I have way too much to lose, and Rudolph feels exactly the same. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. And well done to the two of you for being able to abstain from alcohol, because that is not easy. So before we finish, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, goodbye and good night.